I'm Walt Peterson. We're going to do the history of Sioux City's only Catholic cemetery, Calvary. Everybody's dying to get in here. We work over a lot of people. You have to go through us to get to heaven. Could be a dead-end job. Things are really dead out here. The big dirt nap, your permanent address. Our customers don't talk back. We do a lot of planning, but we never have a crowd. Okay, let's dig in. And they go on and on and on. Calvary Cemetery is Sioux City's only Catholic cemetery. Located on the city's northwest side, it has one of the best views overlooking Sioux City. It is registered as a religious cemetery with the state of Iowa. The first burials in the hills that eventually would become Calvary were performed in the mid-1850s. The earliest known burial is Bridget Mcdermott, 1855. We don't know for sure that she was interred in 1855 and that she wasn't brought in later, but there's no evidence of that. So we assume she was interred before it was officially a cemetery. We had other interments in this time period from 1855 to 1913, but the records are not very complete or accurate. There are a number of memorials with dates from this time. The land for Calvary was purchased in 1870 by Father Thomas Gunn while under the administration of Bishop Hennessy of the Diocese of Dubuque. That tells us a couple of things. One, that Calvary is older than the Sioux City Diocese, as the diocese was created in March in 1902. Father Gunn went from door to door to collect enough money for the first payment of the land. And that tells us that the Dubuque Diocese didn't want to buy the land, and that it also adds to the evidence that there was probably burials going on up there pre-1870, or pre-purchase of the land. The first cemetery board of the directors met on September 22, 1913. That board consisted of the following: Reverend P.J. O'Connor, chairman, then elected first president; Reverend J.L. Kirby, then elected first vice president; Uranus Bruzile, then elected treasurer; James Malone, acting secretary, then elected secretary. These articles of incorporation were adopted at this meeting pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 2 of Title 9 of the 1897 Code of the State of Iowa. These articles were notarized by F.E. Gill, notary for Woodbury County at that time. The bylaws of Calvary Cemetery were also adopted at this meeting. The first sexton began work for Calvary on January 1st, 1915. A house and a car were provided for him. A car in 1915. I can't help but wonder what kind of car. The first mapping was completed in 1916, which would have been the sexton's work, I assume. At the June 1917 meeting, the internment fee was raised from $7.50 for adults and $5 for children. There's a couple of things involved there. One, that pre-1950, children were a big part of the cemetery business. And post-1950, thanks to medical and technological changes, things got better for everyone. Should be noted at this time, once the cemetery was incorporated, everything started to improve, such as better record keeping and grounds maintenance. Some of these pictures, what I did is I went to the spot. We've got some old pictures from an old scrapbook, and I went to the same spot that those old pictures were from. Most are not dated, and tried to look at what it looks like now and then what it looked like 80 years ago. On September 5th, 1919, a meeting was called for the purpose of inspecting the newly completed mausoleum. Let's see here. We had a centennial event in September of 1919. The mausoleum was designed by William Steele and constructed by the Auglaize Mausoleum Company. This is an impressive structure when one considers the construction equipment of the time. The interior of this 500 crypt mausoleum is covered completely in imported white marble. The Aglaé Mausoleum Company actually owned and sold crypts until 1945, when Calvary purchased the remaining unsold crypts for resale. This mausoleum was used for committal services in inclement weather for about 80 years. In bad winters, they would store bodies in the mausoleum or use it as a vault for burial later in the spring. So that mausoleum, I guess the bottom line is that it really changed the whole structure of the cemetery and how things were done. So let's see. And then there's this statue who seems to move around. This is the east entrance of the cemetery. And that would have also been the first entrance of the cemetery. And this is the same spot. If you notice, that statue is gone. This is a map of the cemetery, and this is, we'll get to that. I'll leave that map up. In 1917, they began installing the 14 stations of the cross, each weighing well over 10,000 pounds. In 1920, the installation of the stations was completed, and 388 interment cases were recorded, making for a very busy year. All of this work was done by hand. In comparison, we now do around 150 interments per year with modern equipment, computers, and backhoe. In 1931, the grading started on the west, middle west, central west, northwest, and southwest sections of the cemetery. It was completed and opened in 1935. The west gate and fence would have been installed around this time. Fire damaged the tool house building in the spring of 1934, insurance covering most of the loss. So all of those sections, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but this whole western side of the cemetery would have been up and running around 1935. This red box would have been the original platting of the cemetery. To give the cemetery a more modern appearance, in 1946, a 20-acre expansion was planned. This new section of the cemetery was opened in 1948. This was a major expansion and changed the overall look and operation of the cemetery. In addition, only grass level or flat bronze memorials could be used in this new area. Around this time, the cemetery just started to sell bronze memorials. In the older parts of the cemetery, upright or granite memorials are used. In 1962, paving of the remaining roads was completed. This was a big improvement, especially helpful in winter and spring weather, because those old dirt roads had to be treacherous. The current maintenance building was constructed in 1978. The Mausoleum of the Resurrection was completed in 1993. This mausoleum contains 384 crypts and 60 cremation niches. The chapel in this building is currently used in the winter for committal services. In March 2015, a fire was started in the cemetery and spread to the north 20 acres. It was started by a grave heater used to thaw the ground. Dirt work for the Jordan Valley addition was completed in the year 2000. In 2003, the Perry Creek Flood Control Project brought 31,000 tons of soil to the east end of the cemetery near Talbot Road. And now we'll look at some pictures of those. This is the oldest known photograph of the mausoleum, of the 1919 mausoleum, dirt road, and this picture was provided to me by Tom Munson at the Sioux City Public Museum. Thank you. This is a photograph of what it looks like. I think this picture is probably about 2 years old, and something's changed. I'm going to go back, I hope. Notice that this statue has arrived, and it's the same platform but a different statue, and there's more pictures. We'll get into that too. This is another photograph, and they took a lot of photographs of this building. This was a really big deal for the cemetery to have this structure constructed back then. Again, I don't know how well everyone will be able to see, but there are these little spikes in the ground, which are interesting to me, being a cemetery worker, is when it snowed, they would spike, especially the early years of the cemetery, in order to find graves in the snow. They would put these spikes at the end of the rows, and you could deduce where the grave was at from there, and it would save you a lot of work in the cold winter months. Once again, that's taken from about the same shot, and you can see our statue again. And like I said, they took a lot of pictures of that building. And I guess as long as we're on that building, we just did some remodeling work to the cemetery, or to the mausoleum. We put a new roof on, and then there was a false ceiling removed, and so it's pretty close to its original state, the way William Steele designed it. And once again, you see the spikes in the ground and tracks in the snow. And you'll find out there's a lot of snow going on at this cemetery as we go through this. This is one of the Stations of the Cross. And these statues at the top of the platform, or the base of the stations, were, boy, I don't remember the name of the company, but a company in St. Louis built them. And so they're 100 years old, and they've really held up well. The only maintenance we've had is to replace these wooden crosses through the years. So they really did a good job. And once again, I don't know how they got them in there, because those are big pieces of rock. This is an interesting shot. Lots of pine trees, and that's one of the things between the new pictures that I want and the old pictures that I wanted to show, was that trees are really the big difference between the biggest changes in the cemetery and through the years is really trees, or the landscape is, and you'll see that as we go through these. This is a perfect example. That's almost the exact same spot. And this is looking south towards the east gate, or we call it the Talbot Road gate, even though it's off of 28th, just to simplify people finding it. If you Google the cemetery, this is the gate they'll take you to. And I've tried to change that, but that's Google. This is about the same area, same story. You can kind of see a lot of trees up on the hill and not much up front. And once again, these Stations of the Cross, which are also big landmarks in the cemetery that we use to find graves from and so forth. And you can see that now the trees are up front, and on the back of the hill, most of those trees have been removed. And we'll discuss that as we go too, that there was a Dutch elm disease going through Sioux City in the 50s, and the cemetery lost most of its trees during that time. One more Station of the Cross. That's about the same area and the same routine. The trees are the difference. And this would be the same area. Not much to say. I guess I could talk briefly about the Stations of the Cross, in that that's the Catholics practice. There's a prayer for each Station of the Cross, and it's the 14 events that happened on Christ's way to the crucifix. At the end of the Stations of the Cross, there is a big crucifix, which we will have pictures of here. This is the west gate, and this is the one that would have opened in 35. And this is interesting too because there are very few trees. And way up on top of the hill, there's this water tank that was just removed I think in the year 2000. And what they used to do is they used to pump water to that tank and then feed the cemetery, maintenance building and grounds with that water. And that's the same spot. You can, like I said, trees are the difference. You can't even see the hill for all the trees. So, also the front gate. This would have been at a later time. Also, we can tell because of the trees, and then we notice that this cross has left the top of these pillars somewhere along the line, and more snow. And this is a fairly recent photo of the front gates. And this picture, I do not know this gentleman's name, but he used to do my job out there with these pieces of equipment, and they had their work cut out for them. Going around the hills and the obstacles in the cemetery with this equipment had to be a challenge. And I think this is the building that burned down, because I know there was another one after this. So this picture goes back quite a ways. This is one of my favorite pictures of the cemetery, in that it really shows the devastation of that Dutch elm disease. When you look at the next picture, they're all gone. All those elm trees are hauled away and probably burned up. And this picture, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but this is one of the most visited monuments in the old section, because it's a Woodman of the World monument, and it's shaped like a big old tree. And on one of the ghost sites on the internet, they try to tell you that tree had been turned to stone by some ghost or witchcraft or something, but no, it was the Woodman of the World that dedicated that monument. Every year, and this goes way back, I'm not sure the date of this photo, but we still do this. Every Memorial Day we hold a Mass at 9 o'clock in the morning on Memorial Day morning to pray and have a Mass for all the deceased in the cemetery. And then you can see the Knights of Columbus here, and in the background you can see what's that place called? Okay, we'll go with the big. This is the crucifix I spoke about earlier, and the bishop's chair. The children's home on Military Road. Now it's Angel House. I'll come up with it. And this is the same spot. Once again, you see the trees is the big difference. And this is a shot from the back. And they obviously had a large crowd. From the photos, I would guesstimate probably close to the same numbers we have nowadays. We usually have around 300 people at this Mass. And this is a modern Mass. We hold it in a different location. And the bishops and the priests are buried up in this area where this Mass is held. And this is up in Golgotha section, up near the flagpole is the biggest landmark. And that's that same area downhill from the, once again, trees. This is a couple of cemetery employees and this photo actually can date, as this marker is dated 1948, and that's when the cemetery would have started selling and promoting these grass level or bronze memorials. And I think they needed a photo of the memorial, and they had a couple of the employees. And the strange, it's kind of crazy. I believe that the person that's buried there is related to one of the current employees. Which, and history runs, and that's why I guess we're here today, is history runs real deep through the cemetery. This would have been the employees, I'm guessing in the 40s, late 40s. And I think we still have this tent. When I first started, I drove that Jeep. That tells you how long I've been out there, speaking of ancient history. It didn't have any brakes. The windshield was long gone. OSHA wouldn't have approved this Jeep. But we have an old guy and 2 employees, and that's what we have currently. We have me and Bob and Tony. So history repeats itself, I guess. Got a landscape picture here. Up in this corner, you can kind of see a piece of what used to be a very high hill. Well, and then you'll see in the next photos that was removed around the year 2000 in order to develop newer areas and more snow. This is the same area. That hill that was removed was as high as these trees, so big development. There's the old mausoleum. This is looking down, and this would be Sun Valley Golf Course. And I examined this photo, and it doesn't look like the golf course was there yet. So, and also the roads were not developed. So this, I'm not sure when Sun Valley started, but so this would probably be late 1940s, mid 1940s. So that's an old photograph. It's difficult to take that picture again because the hill that I spoke of earlier is gone, and that's what they stood on top of to take the last photograph. So I wasn't. Yeah, maybe sometime I'll go up there and stand on a ladder or something. This is from that same area up on top of the new development, the development that opened in the 40s on the north end of the cemetery. And West High would be out here eventually. And as you can see, it's pretty much prairie hills and pretty area. And no development yet or anything. So this would have been 1945 probably, because it looks like it's been graded. This is the same area after they paved the road. So this photograph would have been probably in the 50s. And once again, West High would be out here. There's a big communication tower that's there now, and some farmhouses that are there that didn't used to be. And trees. These were nice, small, little trees. And once again, I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but this structure here is what they used to call a frog house. And rather than set that tent, a lot of times they would bring this building around to the gravesite for a committal service and for protection from the wind and rain. And it finally disintegrated, and we no longer use it. And you can see the trees have gotten a lot bigger. And also, I can't stand on that hill, and so this picture is taken from a lower perspective. And you can see the communication towers there. This is the current maintenance building, completed in 1978, which would have been a year before I started working out there. I started working out there part-time, mowing grass and helping out in the summertime. Full-time in 1990. This is the Mausoleum of the Resurrection. This building was completed in 1993. We currently use it for committal services in the wintertime. It has heat, and the chapel has a nice big glass open area, so it works out real well. Because of the view we speak of, that place gets cold in winter, as this indicates. And the wind blows 90 miles an hour, so standing in a tent on top of that hill isn't always conducive, especially if you have elderly people and handicapped, or for obvious reasons. You can see this tree is almost completely buried with snow. And I think that would have been 2011. And this is an interesting picture. I get a lot of questions about this picture. But that is actually how we heat the ground when the ground is frozen. We put some charcoal down, cover it with diesel fuel, and ignite it. And then we cover it with a steel hood. And when you come back in the morning, the ground is pretty much thawed out, and you're able to break your way through and dig. And the old mausoleum is here, so you can kind of see we're on top of that hill again. And you have to be careful when you ignite that diesel fuel, because it can create fire. This is that fire in 2015 where they lit the charcoal and the fire got away from them, and the fire department helped, and as fire department usually does, did a great job of putting out a 20-acre grass fire on the north. It was all cemetery land, but yeah, my hat's off to the firefighters, because we helped somewhat to fight grass fires up there before and this one, and it's not easy work. So there's more. We used to have a tree dump up on top of that hill, and the fire got into the tree dump. Wasn't good. But like I say, the fire department did a great job of putting everything out. There is a house at the bottom of this hill, and I stayed up there till 10 o'clock at night, making sure that her house was safe. So this is looking east from the new mausoleum, and this would have been when they constructed the Perry Creek Flood Control Project. When they excavated Perry Creek, they needed a big hole to put dirt in, and that's what they did. They knocked down all those trees and brought out truckload after truckload of dirt. And this also indicates, you can see Sioux City, you can see Sioux City out here in the distance, and it, standing up here, it really seriously is one of the best views of Sioux City that is anywhere in town. This is from the same area. Once we got grass to grow, and the Perry Creek project was completed. This is the latest addition to the cemetery, and it is the Jordan Valley Columbarium. A columbarium is a small building used to entomb cremated remains, or it's a little bit like a miniature mausoleum. Completed in the spring of 2016, this is a forward-looking project to help meet the needs of our growing number of cremation burials. And actually, it turned out to be a successful endeavor. And then there's surface burials surrounding that are also cremation only. So, and then more snow. We get snow out there, and I like this snow. This picture always reminds me that if you do think about buying spaces at Calvary Cemetery, I suggest you do it in the summertime. We do sell spaces in the winter. We conduct business pretty much nonstop all year long. But as you can imagine, it can be difficult in the winter. Another picture of our mountains of snow. A volunteered board of directors oversees the finances and major projects of the cemetery. Currently, Calvary employs 4 full-time staff, including 2 groundskeepers, 1 office manager, and the executive secretary, that's me, or the executive director. And we do everything. The office manager sells memorials, makes sure that all the regulations are kept, and I kind of do a balancing act between the office and the cemetery itself. Once in a while, I'll help with groundskeeping, and the other 2 guys take care of, like I say, 150 burials a year, plus maintaining equipment and maintaining grounds. So we're busy folks. We do approximately 150 interments a year, of which 50% or close to 50% are now cremations. And you do not have to be Catholic to be interred at Calvary Cemetery. And we bury stillborn infants and children at no charge. Let's see. Next part of this is to make the point that the cemetery is really just an outdoor museum. I made a list of some of the residents that were especially important to the diocese, but also important to Sioux City history. And the first one, of course, is the first bishop, Bishop Garrigan. He was the first bishop from 1902 to 1919, and he is buried or interred under this, we call it the bishop's chair. Bishop Edmund Heelan. If you're a history buff, which you probably are if you're watching this, you probably should do some research on Bishop Heelan. He was an amazing person. I did a little bit of reading and studying about him for this presentation, which I may go into later and I may not. He accomplished amazing. There's a reason they named the high school after him. He started Briarcliff and most of the parishes in the diocese. He was I can't think of the word, but he was involved in getting them all started, building churches and starting parishes. Bishop Mueller, he was bishop from 1948 to 1970. Bishop Bretiman, he was bishop from 1970 to 1983. And Mother Gertrude. I didn't know anything about Mother Gertrude until I worked out there. Amazing lady. And I think I'll talk briefly about Mother Gertrude because it also helps with the point of the history of the cemetery. And I guess as long as I'm on that, the cemetery or the Sioux City Museum does do historical tours about every 4 years or 4 or 5 years at Calvary, and they do their own, pick their own residents and discuss their history and what their involvement was with Sioux City's history. But with Mother Gertrude, she is the founder of St. Vincent Hospital. She was an Irish girl from Pennsylvania who entered a German-speaking Benedictine community in Conception, Missouri, made her way to Sioux City, established a hospital, and could point to one of her good friends as Lakota warrior Chief Sitting Bull. And the reason that's important is it just tells you how deep the history goes at Calvary. In her 60 years of consecrated life, Mary Ellen McDermott wove prayer, hospitality, and care, ultimately leaving a legacy which now benefits Mercy Medical Center. Born in 1864, McDermott entered the convent at age 15, took the name Sister Gertrude. In 1881, Bishop Martin Marty of Sioux Falls, also a Benedictine, traveled to Missouri in search of teachers. Sister Gertrude and 3 other sisters traveled by train and boat to the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in the Dakota Territory to teach at a government school for Native American children. I'm not going to go on, but look her up. Fascinating lady, especially when you consider a lot of the burials at that time, the burial records, when we go back in the records, many times the wife of the decedent, or a wife of the their names aren't even in the records, so that tells you how women were treated back then, and for her to accomplish all she did is just nothing short of amazing. This was my original boss at the cemetery, Monsignor Richard Zink. He was the director of the Calvary Cemetery, so his involvement with the cemetery and the cemetery board of directors from 1962 to 2013. So he had he constructed both the maintenance building and the newer Mausoleum of the Resurrection, and just was a great guy, and he had a great love of the cemetery and knew the importance of the cemetery to the diocese and to the city. Joseph Leone, the first settler of Sioux City. Same story. One of the most popular graves in the cemetery, in that 4th grade students, they bring them out by the busload in a normal year and visit this grave to visit Sioux City's first settler. He died in 1900. They built this memorial for him in 1953, I believe. And of course, they did right in that if he was the first settler and lived in this area in the late 1800s, he would have had a muzzleloader and a powder horn and a possibles bag, and a different life than we lead now, that's for sure. But same story. The history goes deep. John Aaronsdorf. Most Sioux City history buffs will remember the Aaronsdorf story. He was accused of shooting George Haddock in 1886, and that's a whole nother story that you could do an hour presentation just on that, and I think they may have. T.S. Martin Department Store. Once again, you could go, if you delve into his history, they did say, the one thing I know about him, that some of the retail, the rules of retail management are still being used today, of things that he, the big box stores basically developed from his department store. Was a big store full of everything. So important person, and he is interred in the old mausoleum. Edward Monahan, first soldier of the 168th, killed in action in World War I. The Monahan Post Band was named for him. Once again, history rolls deep. William Steele, architect, designed 250 buildings and churches in the Midwest. The Prairie style architecture was his namesake, and looking at this picture and that smile, from what I know about him, he was like a practical joker and a character and a very good architect. And the dates of death on his marker are in Roman numerals, so you get to do math to figure out his birth and death dates. Mary Trelia was also big in Sioux City history and helping immigrants. Same story. I could go on for an hour just about her. Tommy Bolin, this is the most visited grave that we have at the cemetery. He died clear back in 1976, and we still get people from all over the world saying they love his albums, love his music. He was not very old, 24 I think he was when he died, and he played with some pretty amazing bands, Zephyr, Billy Cobham, James Gang, Deep Purple, and on and on and on. And like I say, people still, we have on our Facebook page, we have a map that shows you how to find Tommy Bolin's grave, because so many people still visit, which is pretty amazing. He was a great guitar player. Blair Shaquin, a local Sioux City historian. He knew especially early Sioux City history, the fur trade era and the steamboat era. He was an expert in all those. And if you had a question about that time period, you would ask Blair, and he was an asset to Sioux City historians. This is not William Metz, and I'm not going to spend much time here, but Metz Baking turned into a major baking company in Sioux City. That would be the founder and his son. I'm not sure where the founder is buried, so I'm not going to stay there. Jeannie Velkolskas, was the first female firefighter in Sioux City, and I put her in here because it makes the point that history continues, even though you might not think that in these modern times that anything is important to history. But someday people will look back, and the fact that she was the first firefighter, and now they have other female fighters. She paved the way. So history is still happening, and I like to make the point here that if this is part of the reason cemeteries exist, is you can go back and pay your respects to people that have paved the way for us. So throwing your ashes off a bridge or something, if you want to do that, that's fine. But if you can use a cemetery, I recommend it, because I've seen how it works. And people visit their loved ones, and it still happens. I had some people yesterday come into the mausoleum, visit their great-grandparents. So just a plug for the cemetery. This area is called the Garden of Holy Innocence. We just expanded this into the new Babyland, and behind this monument is stillborn infants and pre-20-week fetus, and it's, as everyone well knows, the Catholic Church believes that birth begins at inception, and that these kids deserve the same respect that anyone does. So we open this area especially for them, so that they have a proper burial. Then there's that guy. That's what I do in my spare time. One of the things I do in my spare time. This was at the May Museum in Fremont, Nebraska. I don't know how we're doing for time, but we have a lot of questions. Usually when I do this presentation in front of a live audience, I open it up for questions about now. And so I just guessed at some questions, the most common ones. And one is, do you have to be Catholic to be buried at Calvary Cemetery? And no, we accept everyone. There's, cemetery work is a corporal work of mercy, and we take that seriously. Why do cremation burials cost so much? That's a question I could answer for the next half hour. But we spend as much staff time doing cremation burials as we do traditional burials, and that's for a lot of reasons. One main thing, the actual burial taking place, the actual digging of the grave and the filling of the grave, you're really not talking that much time. It's the record keeping. For every burial, we record every burial in 9 different places to ensure that if anything happens anywhere, the records won't be lost, as that has happened in a lot of smaller cemeteries in the past. And a lot of times with a cremation burial, that'll happen at a later date, not at the actual church service or mass. And so the family will tend to spend more time at the gravesite, and we will actually spend more time dealing with cremations, and on and on and on. I digress. How do you find someone buried at Calvary Cemetery? There's several ways. You could use findagrave.com or use a computer located in the new Mausoleum of the Resurrection. It's set up so that if you go in there and tap on the mouse, an alphabetical list of Calvary Cemetery interments shows up on the screen or the kiosk. Or you can call, write, or email us and do things the old-fashioned way. And sometimes it's 60 acres of cemetery. Sometimes it can be difficult to find some of those graves. We'll help you. That's not a problem at all. I get asked a lot of times how many people are buried at Calvary Cemetery. And I always say, first thing I always say is all of them. But it's around 20,000 interments. So you can see the problem sometimes trying to find someone. Is the cemetery full or out of land? And no, we're not out of land. We have enough land to the north and to the east of the cemetery current boundaries to probably go several hundred years. One note of business is we do not perform burials or allow any sometimes monument companies, but no business is supposed to be conducted on Sundays, as it is a religious Catholic cemetery. Cemetery hours and gate times, we open up the gates every morning at 8 o'clock, and then we usually shut them around 8 o'clock or at sunset. We used to not do that, and we had vandalism problems. So as far as the new mausoleum, it also has an automatic door lock system. It unlocks itself at 8 in the morning and locks itself at 8 at night. And that is about all I have. So hopefully, I got halfway close to an hour anyway. I get rolling. I don't think I have any more. I just thank the museum for allowing me to use this time, and Teresa and everybody at the museum. So thank you and good night.